Hey everyone, this is Renee, and I want to share my opinion on Junji Ito. So, I have been reading Junji Ito manga for years. I'm pretty sure the first one I ever read was the Amagara Fault, the Enigma at Amagara Fault, and it was terrifying to me because it was my first instance of reading Junji Ito's art style and his manner of storytelling, and the ending was just really uncanny and unnerving and gave me like actual physical chills. I glanced the last page and the sort of like reveal, and I was like, oh, I don't like that. But I did like it, and so I went back and started reading more, and I'm pretty sure I've read probably, I'm gonna say 80% of everything that Junji Ito has ever published. So there's always new things that are coming out, and of course, like, I didn't keep track of what I did and did not read over the years, but what I do know is that I have opinions about the newest Netflix feature of Junji Ito Maniac, the Tales of Macabre, and I wanted to share them so that you just hear it from a fan of somebody who has been very much immersed in Junji Ito's style of horror writing and who gave the animated media a chance, and what I thought, as well as review some other articles that I looked at that were other people's opinions and see how I feel about their opinion. So of course, feel free to tell me what your opinion is throughout the video. So one of the first things I'm going to do, because it's topical, is to talk about the episodes of Junji Ito Maniacs. Just know that there will be spoilers in this. And that may or may not be a good or bad thing depending on whether you do want to read some of this going forward, or if you're deciding to skip reading and going straight into watching these animated versions of these stories. So most of the stories in Maniac are from a bunch of short stories that have been compiled over the years from Junji Ito. I have to pull up a list because there's so many, and I want to make sure I'm referencing the ones that are in the anime as well. So I'm on comicbook.com. It's just their ranking. So this is going to go from like least unsettling to most unsettling. Some of them I already knew were going to be like meh, and some of them I just wanted to get through the reveal. You may be along for the icky, weird feeling of the ride. Me, I'm all about show me the weird stuff. And there's a difference between things that are like horror and gore and horror and unsettling or surprising or mysterious. It's a mix of this, but Junji Ito in these particular stories tend to move less in the gore category and more in the ick and unsettling. So there are mentions of death, there are mentions of possible suicide, there are mentions of body mutilation and bodily fluids. So just be prepared for that. This is not the goriest anime that you will watch or that anyone has ever seen or that has been out there. So I'll go through these and sort of talk about, you know, what made them sort of unsettling and what I did or did not like about them being added to this collection on Netflix. So there's one called 4x4 Walls. It does feature this character that's reoccurring in Junji Ito stories named Soichi. He's like just the weird kid of the family. He always has nails in his mouth, and he's just always been sort of annoying to his family and people around him. He shows up in at least one other show, one other episode, and it's much more unsettling, and it actually features one of the images that people see most likely when they are Googling Junji Ito. Oh, the next one is Soichi's beloved pet. So again, with Soichi, and this is not in the order that you would watch them. This is in the comicbook.com's order of them ranked from least unsettling to most unsettling. If you Google Junji Ito, more than likely the image used from this episode in this story shows up. It is a cat with something crazy in its mouth, and that's really the extent of the craziness of this episode. There is some build up because like this cat is transforming into like, it used to be cute, but then it's kind of like cursed, and so it becomes like not cute and is just finding weird stuff. So but I didn't love the voice acting of this. Maybe this is a good time to mention that. So voice acting has come a long way in English dubs, and I appreciate all English voice actors for really evolving that over the last decade or so. But I had to switch back to Japanese maybe like 75% of the way through watching it, because I just wanted to see if it made me feel more connected with watching this series, and like it kind of did, but I just feel like the weird cat sounds were like took me out of it actually feeling scary, because it was like a person being like meow meow, and I was like, well, okay, that's not scary. The strange Hizukiri siblings. Another thing I didn't like about, this is just going to be how my channel works. I'm just going to jump around about things. So this expressed one of the things that I didn't like, which is almost going back to the very beginning of how this is done. Netflix did a great job of marketing this show using imagery that was not in the show. It's like watching the Spice World movie and realizing that part where they come out of the bathroom is not actually in the movie. There's art and promotional art for Maniac that shows the Hikizuri siblings with no heads. 6 bodies with no heads and just shadows behind them. And you're just like, ooh, that looks really spooky and creepy. And like you watch their episode and like, yes, they are creepy and kooky, mysterious and spooky, but like they're just problematic in general. And this part where they're headless does not pop up in the shows. I get it's promo, but it's not necessarily the aspect of the scary part of their episode. Why even use this? Which again brings you to another part, which I'll talk about later, is the opening sequence of this show is really, really, really good. Like really, really good. But it features Tomie, and like it's not the part of the Tomie series or story that they even feature in Maniac in this Netflix show. So it's bizarre to me because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna see Tomie, and Tomie is like there's a lot of Tomie to talk about, and they only use one story and not even the full part of that story from her sort of like anthology. It's almost as if the opening of Maniac is its own episode that you're gonna want to watch over and over again because it has like some really cool bumping music, but it doesn't really align with Tomie being that prevalent in the stories that they are featuring. That also brings me back to some of the marketing that they did, which showed another scene from Tomie. It's the weird amalgamation of like worm girl head situation peeking around the corner when the other like schoolgirl outfit girl is looking at it. That is a Tomie story, and it's not in Maniac. So if you're looking for that in here, it's not here. Unless I missed some episodes or they're going to do a sequel or a follow-up, it's not there. So you should probably read Tomie in the marketing, not in the show. Why? So weird. All right, number 17 is Intruder. I'm going to be honest, I skipped this one. I was not invested in it and knowing what the outcome was going to be. I pretty much kind of called it, and I skipped really quickly through it. Okay, Ali was creepy, but I think it was creepier reading it than it was watching it. One thing that popped up a few times was the fact that they used cell shading for some of the animated parts, like some of the animation, and I honestly think that takes away from the style of drawing that Junji Ito is known for. I'm sure it's great for animation, but a lot of what makes Junji Ito so scary is the two-dimensionalness of what he's portraying, and the way he shades and the way he does shadows. You can just barely make out something creepy on the wall or in the background or in the corner. Like that is what made Junji Ito really weird. And this just like doesn't allow you to feel that. At least it didn't allow me to feel that. I felt like even if I didn't quite know it was coming, like I didn't feel as creeped out about it because it didn't have that same level of like scribble and like depth. So the alley is fine. Unendurable Labyrinth, I also skipped. I think at the point that these came on the sequence of episodes, I was like, I'm just gonna go to the ones that I either do remember and I think are going to be good, or just getting quickly to the reveal. The thing that drifted ashore, I watched the whole thing. Whales are incredibly scary. I hate whales, all giant fish, anything that comes from the ocean is scary. So this generally would have been super duper scary. When you're reading manga, you can go through it relatively quickly, or you can take your time and read and really look at what's happening around in the scenery. When you're watching anime, in order to elongate the story for however many minutes they have to make sure they have an episode, there is a lot of singular shots of two people talking, giving a little bit of their backstory. When it's on paper and you're reading it, they're not moving, there's no animation, so of course you're like, well, we're here, I'm reading, you guys aren't moving around, so I can read, and this is going to be great. But when somebody else is speaking it, you have to either keep them still so that you can get the exposition of what they're talking about, or you may have other things going on in the background, but now it kind of becomes a little bit distracting because you're pacing how they're speaking versus when the actual action can take place. And then when something weird does happen, you have other people speaking over it, and you can't just like go back and look at, whoa, creepy thing. Let me look at that for a bit and try to process it with my brain, and then go back and read what the characters are discussing about it. You have to just go with their flow and their time. There's a big giant fish monster thing with creepy googly eyes and like just grossness, and you are listening to two people talk about, you know, someone they lost at sea, and you know how the scientists were looking at, you know, it's just weird to see it pace in anime. So also I've seen someone talk about this, like some of these stories do not have endings, so this one is sort of open-ended. You're just like, wait, what is happening at the end of this, and why is no one freaking out more than they should be freaking out? That's it, that's the end of it. There's no addition to the story in the manga or in the show. I mean, you could read Gyo and probably get a pretty good idea of what could happen, but they are completely different stories. But you should still read Gyo, it's pretty good. All right, Ice Cream Bus. Now we're getting into unsettling. Ice Cream Bus was awful. It was like good awful. Like it was not scary, but it was the most unsettling, and it does deal with like children. Whatever you think is going to happen in this, you will probably still be slightly surprised, even if you were to sort of guess. It is weird, and it has like this, you know, hot unassuming, well, he's definitely assuming because he's got white hair and crazy eyes, and he's in this weird ice cream truck, so it's got to be a crazy person. This one definitely like blew me away. Like there were a couple episodes where I literally like screamed out loud. I was like, ah, like, oh my God. I actually put like my reaction on TikTok if you want to watch that and see what happens. But I like this one. This one definitely kept me going, and I was like nervous the whole time because I don't remember reading this one and I was unsure how it was going to end. So this one is actually a really good one. Bully. Bully is you have to keep going. Like you have to be along for the ride from the beginning, because you will start to be like, well, what is the scariness? And it's not necessarily scary as much as it is very unsettling in like a paranoia agent sort of way. At the end, you're gonna be like, oh, like I don't like that. Like that's really gonna be your reactions. This one was worth the time it took to get to that point, but like, oh no, poor child. Whispering Woman. You know, I don't remember this one. Maybe I skipped this one. I really don't remember watching this episode, so I can't really talk much about it. Gonna skip it, but it's like number 9 on comicbook.com's list. Tomie Photo. Okay. Again, Tomie is a long... This is all of Tomie. So just heads up. This particular story in Tomie, I think it's one of the first stories. It's not the very first one, but it's kind of like early on. And it goes further with the photography character that they introduce. The weird reveal of Tomie's like funky, crazy, extra head hair situation, ghost guy, whatever you want to call that. all that is creepy all the way through. There's definitely like body mutilation that they don't focus too much on. They show it, but I think they like calmed it down a little bit. But the end of the episode is both like incredibly freaky and terrifying, but also really infuriating because the characters don't react crazy enough to what is actually happening on the screen. And it frustrates me because the episode just ends and the character is just kind of like, huh, and like the most bizarre, weird, creepy thing just happened. There's actually more to that part of the story. Again, read Tomie if you want to see more of what happens, but like it gets real weird. And but yeah, they did a good job with that one for the most part. Long hair in the attic, you know, the whole premise is really creepy. It is semi-gory, but the fact that this is animated, that sort of deflated like a really potentially creepy part to me. It's not necessarily the cell shading. There's definitely a part that like in the 80s, 90s sort of era of storytelling and horror, like this would definitely like click and really freak people out. And honestly, the sounds that they used in this were good enough to give that extra appeal of like, this is just really icky and gross and scary. But I just didn't feel like they put enough attention into how they animated one of like the ending scenes of this. It could have been like much more impactful. Honestly though, probably for the best, because if it had been more scary, I know I would have been like that would have been the one to give me chills. It's a good one. I see why it's higher on this list. Library Vision. I'm gonna have to read why they think this one is good, because like it wasn't my thing. I didn't like it. It wasn't gory, it wasn't scary, it was just, I don't know poetic, but but what is cool is that the character in it, his name is Renee, and at one point the character was like, there you are, Renee, and I was like, that's creepy because I'm right here and you are looking at me. But I wasn't feeling this one. Toontown, very creepy, very awful. This one did a good job. If you want to tie in some like sort of environmental horror, which Junji Ito does very, very well, aka Uzumaki, this one really builds up. Once you get a part of like part one of a multi-part reveal, you are definitely very satisfied. It's almost like well deserved, and you're like, ooh, like that was too much. I did like the way they animated sort of like the creepy elements of this one, Toontown. The Story of the Mysterious Tunnel. I think this is one of the first short stories in a anthology of short stories, because I remember it being one of the first ones I also read. The reveal is good, the creepiness is creepy, the movements are a little creepy, similar to the one about like the dark alley. I sort of wish that the animation wasn't so good or the style wasn't so crisp. Like there's things that are like meant to be shadows and scratchy and really noticeable to the last minute that this tried to do, but I could be speaking from just somebody who's read a lot of horror and things and maybe slightly desensitized to this. But if you've not experienced Junji Ito before, this one will definitely creep you out. Sandman's Lair. Holy carp. That was not fun to watch. It's hard when I talk because like not fun means it was good. This one was hella creepy and like super ick. The way they talk about how it ends is also very ick, and you're just like, ugh, I hate everything that happened in this, and like, ew. But no, this one was actually really good. Hanging Balloons. Yes and no. Again, I think this is one where the cell shading took away from the ability to make the visuals as creepy as possible, but what is actually happening is also very scary. It's a bunch of people being hung and then their giant head literally hanging them and going around. Once you're dead, you're dead. So like, what's the end game for these balloons, really? The concept is scarier to me than the art itself. But the way that the characters scream in this one and another one, there was like a huge scream. I was like, these people are scared. So way to go voice acting on that one. Headless statues, anything with walking statues is bad. This was BioShock level creepy. It is what it is. Yeah, it's bad. It's scary and it's good. Layers of Terror? Oh, really? Yeah, that one. Outside of the ice cream one, this was the one that made me like scream out loud. What the hell is happening the entire time? Every time something happens, you're like, what? What? I'm sorry, what? And you just have to go with the story until it's done, and then you hate it, and everybody is awful, and I hate everybody in this episode. So, definitely, it deserves to be highly ranked on this list. It was a good one. Watch it all the way through. Number 1, Mold. Yeah, it is scary. It's weirdly in black and white, which, you know, I kind of appreciate because there's attention to textures that are important, and the visuals are also pretty scary. I would say this one really unnerved me when I read it, and because now I knew what the story was going to be and how it was going to come across, like maybe that's why I feel the way that I do about it being like, is it scary, isn't it scary? That whole thing that I talked about, when you're reading, you can view what's happening, and then once you've read and understand that, you maybe go back and say, okay, what was I looking at? What are these weird nuanced details? And with this, there was just like a lot of movement, but I feel like they paced it okay to be able to tell the story of it. But I also feel like the transition of time is maybe a little too quick. It's hard for me to say exactly, but I will say this one was a good one, so I'm not going to spoil it too much. But I do remember reading this one and feeling like pretty unnerved about it. So yeah, that is the list of those 20. Hopefully I didn't spoil too much for you, but I'm going to say this. If you can find out where to read them, you may enjoy that a little bit more. But finding something that if they're unnerving you and you're watching the anime and you're like, this is creepy, I love it, it's giving you that weird, cool, tingly feeling, then like enjoy it and go through it. And if you decide you want to read some later, there's still so much more story to read. Do you remember when I showed you the Tomie book? So much more story to read. So I am going to look at another list and kind of give you my ones that are basically my favorites. Oh, this is a long list. Yeah, no, don't like this. Oops. Okay. So I'll try to sort of categorize them because there are a lot. If you really want a good environmental horror, Uzumaki. It's a classic. It will, you know, take you a while to read. There's multiple chapters. It is just got some wonderfully disturbing imagery. It's been on like a Day After Tomorrow, but like if the world or the city was actually like attacking, like that was what is attacking you, not just like, you know, global warming, but like something more sinister than that. Gyo, Gyo. It's about fish with legs. It actually has 2 parts. One part deals with the creepy fish, and one part deals with the creepy people when the fish all rot and die. More of like a spacey horror is Hellstar Remina. I think that's probably my favorite long-form story by Junji Ito because I like that it involves space and stars. I'm pretty sure the people who made Don't Look Up were highly inspired by Hellstar Remina. I would be surprised if anyone working on it had not at least read it. One that I rarely hear people talk about, it's a longer short story, and it's just in one of the anthologies somewhere, is The Village of Sirens. I remember watching a YouTube video where they were like showing Junji Ito creepy cryptids from the internet, and he was so adorable. He'd be like, oh, so scary. But one of them was like a siren-headed monster thing from the internet, probably a SCP or something. And he was like, oh, I have a story about sirens in a city, and it's the Village of the Sirens. And like it takes like a crazy turn, and of course there's sirens, and the sirens are very creepy, and of course you can't hear them, but you can with your soul because Junji Ito has drawn it in a way that you can. And it goes into just this like weird sort of religious horror. So I would say that's probably one of my favorites. But Hellstar Remina, I plan to actually get that, like a book of that, so that I can add to my very small but very pristine and important and curated collection of hard copies that I have. So that's my time, guys. I wanted to share my opinions. Please do not let them take away from any of the content that you really, really want to enjoy. Obviously, I'm just here to give my opinion. and hear about yours and what you liked and didn't like about this series. There is another series that was done with Junji Ito, you know, that Snail Girl and some more Suichi stuff. I honestly didn't watch it because it was not necessarily anime, but also I've already read those stories, so I wasn't as invested. This one, I gave it a chance, and again, opening sequence, real good. But the rest of it, I would say 70% based off of my interest. 65-70% of it was actually like really entertaining to watch. But I wouldn't say I was like, we're all 20. So, okay, now that is my time. Thanks for watching. I'm going to try this new cool sign-off thing so I know when to shut the heck up. And that is stay peachy. Renee for Atlanta. Bye.